I'm Kimmy.
I'm Robert.
Thanks, wonderful audience. Okay, so today I'll be using my phone as my clicker. Optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence. And Helen Keller said this, and this is from BernieQuote.com. Here are my sources for today. So today I'll be talking about Helen Keller, and this is a picture of Helen Keller in her mid-20s. She was born in 1880 and she died in 1968. And Helen Keller is a very inspirational woman because she became ill when she was young and she was blind and deaf for the remainder of her years. And she overcame these huge obstacles of being blind and deaf, which is amazing. You don't hear about this every day. So that's why I decided to speak about Helen Keller, because she's a true inspiration to pretty much everybody. And she eventually learned to read and write even though she was blind and deaf. So this is really amazing. And this picture is from artsheep.com. The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. And this is another amazing quote by Helen Keller. It's one of my favorites and probably one of the most noted. And this quote is from BernieQuote.com. So Helen Keller was born on June 27th in 1880 in Tuscumbia, Alabama. She was born into a pretty wealthy family. They owned a large plantation. Her father was a newspaper editor, and her mom loved to read and write whenever she wasn't taking care of Helen. In February of 1882, Helen became extremely ill, and they didn't think she was going to live, but the illness caused her to lose all of her sight and all of her hearing. So this was a really huge obstacle, obviously, for her family, and her family didn't realize right away that this would be such a problem, but it really was. They really didn't have any way of communicating with Helen. So they went to Alexander Graham Bell, who was an avid supporter of the deaf and the blind, and he recommended that they go to the Perkins School of the Blind, and so they did, and that school sent them Anne Sullivan on March 3rd in 1880 to help Helen communicate efficiently with her family. And Anne Sullivan did so much for Helen. She literally helped her to communicate with everyone. When Anne first came, it didn't go well at first because it was a really big challenge. Helen was very stubborn, but Anne finally learned a way to communicate with her and help her learn words. And so one day, when they were outside, they were sitting next to a water pump, and Helen put her hands under the water pump, and then Anne signed the words water into her hand, and then it finally just clicked, and she was able to learn what objects meant. And so later that day, she learned probably 30 more words. And so Helen and Anne continued on with this method for the rest of the time that Anne was with her so she could understand things. And eventually, Helen would learn to read and write, which is amazing. And this is a picture of Anne and Helen is touching Anne's lips, so she's basically reading her lips with her fingers. And this picture is from Perkins.org. Walking with a friend in the dark is better than walking alone in the light. Another quote from Helen Keller, which is definitely very true to her heart because she went through this daily. This quote is also from BernieQuote.com. As for Helen's accomplishments, over 25 years, Helen would learn to speak so that others could understand her. And if you think about that, that's really crazy because if you're deaf, you don't know how people sound when they're talking. And if you're blind, you can't see their lips moving. And Helen was both of these, and yet she still learned to speak. So Helen attended some speech classes at Horace Mann School for the Deaf in 1890. And after she completed those, she was completely determined to attend college. So she attended the Cambridge School for Young Ladies in 1896. And lots of famous individuals were extremely impressed with Helen, including Mark Twain. And Mark Twain had a friend that he was talking to named Henry H. Rogers, who then willingly just wanted to pay for the rest of Helen's college at Richland College. And she graduated cum laude at the age of 24 in 1904 from her class. So over the rest of those years, Helen was able to master several methods of communication, including speech, braille, typing, and so many others, including finger spelling as well. And so many people realized that this was a really big deal and it was a really big inspiration to others, and it would be in the years to come. So they encouraged her to write her own book called The Story of My Life. So Helen traveled all over the world to share her story to others and to read her book to others. And she also founded Helen Keller International, which took her all over the world as well. She founded that in 1915. And this picture is a picture of Helen sitting in class. She's on a typewriter. It's really amazing because she knows where all the keys are, even though she's blind and deaf. And this picture is from afb.org. Keep your face to the sunshine and you cannot see a shadow. Helen Keller said this. It's from brainyquote.com. So influence, Helen Keller was such a huge influence and still is today. However many years later, I'm standing here talking about her, and that just shows you how much she's influenced people over the years. She was appointed a counselor of international relations for the American Foundation of the Blind overseas. In over 11 years of her life, she would travel to 35 different countries on 5 different continents, sharing her story. And in 1955, at the age of 75, she went on a 40,000-mile trek across Asia to share her story. And that's insane. At 75 years old, deaf and blind, she went 40,000 miles across Asia to share her story. So she was also inspired to write The Miracle Worker, which was a movie based off of her book, and that came years later. So today, that's actually a movie that I've watched in my classes. It's very inspiring, and it shows basically the whole story of what she went through. Helen was elected into the Women's Hall of Fame in 1965, and she earned the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1964. She also won the Theodore Roosevelt Distinguished Medal Award in 1936. And this is a picture of Helen in her older years. And this picture is from acfiles.biography.com. Life is either a great adventure or it's nothing. Helen Keller said this once again, and it's from brainyquote.com. So in closing, today I talked to you about Helen Keller. I talked about her early life, how she was such an inspiration to others, how she overcame so many obstacles with the help of Anne Sullivan. She accomplished speaking many different languages. She went to different countries. She wrote her own book. She shared her story. And she influenced so much on society. She joined organizations. She made her own organizations. And she just simply spread her joy and happiness even though she was deaf and blind. Thank you. And here's my audience. Thanks, guys.